During the period, where wars were always ongoing, two kings sought to come together to enrule the world, to ensure peace and harmony. They were the king of the Garuda and the king of the Makoma. Both kings sought to be invincible, so they sought the help of a sorcerer who could grant only one of them the power of immortality. The power lies in a necklace made of elements not of this world. Hatred and jealousy came in the heart of the Garuda king. He betrayed the Makoma king and convinced the sorcerer to his side. The sorcerer reveals a prophecy that a future ancestor of the Makoma king will come to avenge his people. He will come as a son of the seas, a king of the land. He will come as the Sailor King. The wars continued for decades. The Romans and the Chinese people of Asia decided to give their prince and princess in marriage, to ensure peace. A prince from the Romans and a princess from China. The prince with his army started their journey across the Arabian seas to meet his to-be wife. The seas and oceans roared at their ships. This causes a loss in many Roman sons until there was only one ship left. They arrived at a city called Goa. They speak to the elder of the place to lend them a ship and a sailor, to help them get to China and complete the marriage between the Prince of Rome and the Princess of China. They hear a commotion going on outside and the prince goes to check. It turns out to be a fight between two men, their names being Beam and Sept. Before the fight begins, Sept is seen flirting with his opponent's sister. Beam starts throwing furious blows at Sept. Sept manages to evade all of them. He is sent flying by Beam. Beam gives Sept a kick in the chest which causes pain. Sept raises his head and sees the prince. Beam throws Sept to hit a vendor's shop. Sept, who has had enough of this, jumps at Beam. He strangles Beam using the chains holding him. He throws Beam to the ground and everyone is shocked. Beam comes with a sword. He attacks Sept with it. Sept evades the attacks and uses the chains to trap the sword. He then uses his legs to push Beam back. Sept evades an attack by leaping into the air. He dodges another by pulling back. Sept gives Beam a back kick and blinds his eyes with sand. Sept leaps on Beam's shoulders using the chains to break his neck. The community come to kill Sept. The prince and his men come to protect him. Sept thanks them and the prince asks him to help them travel to China. The city elder recommends Sept and says that Sept has lived on the seas since childhood and also has the map of the sea in his mind. Sept refuses this offer and the prince promises him gold. This convinces Sept and he agrees to the prince's request. The prince and Sept are seen having a chat. They engage in a friendly duel. The fight begins and the prince wins the first round. They start the second battle and the movements of Sept changes. He moves in the ship like the sea itself and manages to pin down the prince's sword. The prince struggles to pull out his sword and leaves it. Sept gives the prince's sword. After pulling it out they talk about the marriage between the prince and his wife-to-be. This conversation makes them open up to each other. As the moon brightens, Sept with the prince see some dead bodies in a canoe. They get to their destination the following day. We see the princess with her admiral called Li. The princess named San has asked Li to aid her escape from the country. Li refuses to help due to his loyalty to the king. Sept introduces the prince to Li. The maid of the princess is mesmerized by the beauty of Sept. She thinks Sept is the prince. Sept, Li, and the prince are seen warming up themselves. The prince leaves to get an item. San, who is the princess, is also seen escaping through the forest. The prince, who has been following them all this while, catches them. He requests to aid the princess's escape through the forest. At noon, the sound of the war horn awakens Sept. He goes to Li and he sees the ships of the Garudas. The prince and princess with the maid is captured by the Garuda soldiers. The sorcerer of the Garudas causes lightning to strike the ships of the Chinese soldiers. Their king leads the soldiers and shoot their arrows, killing most of the Chinese and Roman soldiers. The princess is taken into the Garuda ship. The prince follows and starts a fight with the Garuda king. The prince gets the upper hand and is able to stab the Garuda king. The king heals and kills the prince, stabbing him in the stomach. Sept sees this as he is enraged. He picks up 2 swords and starts to kill the Garuda men. The attackers keep coming as Sept climbs to the top of a bamboo stand. He fights his followed attackers and the stand comes crashing down, killing most of the Garuda men. An exhausted Sept continues to fight until he falls unconscious. He wakes to an old man named Grand and his daughter named Sia. Grand explains to Sept that he is the chosen one his people have been waiting. They have been attacked and abused by the Garuda king and now the prophecy had been fulfilled. Grand further explains that the spirit of the ancestors guided him to Sept and that was how he came to meet him on the battlefield. Sept with rage and revenge in his heart seeks to destroy the Garudas. Sept is trained by Grand to prepare him for the upcoming battle. He also trains the men in the town to fight. The princess is seen in a room. Her maiden comes in saying that she knows what makes the evil king invincible. It turns out that the maid sneaked into the king's chambers and eavesdropped on his conversation with the sorcerer. She says that once the necklace is taken off, the king can be killed. Sept and Grand's daughter fall for each other and get married. Li and the prince who survived the Garuda king's stab arrive at the shores of Sept's town. They seek to save the princess and Sept seeks revenge for his people. The trio prepare for the battle. Sept says goodbye to his wife and the Grand. The Garuda king comes to the princess's chambers. He is seduced by the princess and they both fall on the bed. The king hears a war cry and leaves. The princess shows her maiden that she had taken the king's necklace of immortality. We see Sept with a device made of broken mirror. He uses it to direct the sun's heat rays to the Garudas in boats. This sets their boats and bodies on fire. The sorcerer causes the clouds to block the sun, which renders the device useless. Sept gives a speech to his men and this makes them determined for the battle. They attack the Garudas on the shore, causing many to lose their lives. The prince uses a fighting style named Kali, with his weapons being 2 strong sticks. Sept on the other hand uses a sword and fights like the moving sea waves, terrorizing his opponents. The Garudas shoot arrows at Sept. He manages to block their arrows except one which hit his shoulder. The princess and the maiden are seen searching for each other. The maiden pretends to be dead by putting an arrow in her armpit. The prince meets with the king of the Garudas. The prince starts using speed kicks to overwhelm the king. Blood starts to come from the king's mouth, which causes him to wonder. The princess comes, telling the prince that the king no longer has his immortality. The both engage in a second fight. The king reads the prince's moves and counters with his claw weapon. This leaves the prince incapacitated. The king merely dodges a sword thrown by Li. Li engages the king in battle using his kung fu skills. It turns out not to be enough to rival the strength the Garuda king. Li is thrown to hit a pole and is almost killed. Sept comes to the rescue as he starts to attack the king. They engage in a hand-to-hand combat and are seen on par with each other. Sept takes a sword and swings it at the king. They both get a hold of the sword until it is thrown into the sky. Sept jumps and catches the sword midair, using it to stab the Garuda king. The Roman and the Chinese warriors are seen coming in their numbers on ships. The rest of the Garuda men flee as their king is now dead. We see Sept, with dead bodies scattered around him. The sorcerer comes outside mentioning the name, the Sailor King. It took the leadership of 3 warriors from 3 nations to defeat the evil king. The moral of the story is that, together we stand, divided we fall.